There's no justification for it, Judge, and there's no justification for John Phillips then taking that evidence and publishing it on his Twitter account.
They posted a murder victim's autopsy on Twitter like it was nothing. The detective building the case against Melly got caught trying to manufacture testimony. 4 charges, gone. But none of that is even the wildest part, because new evidence just hit that the prosecution never wanted seeing daylight, and it's about to blow this whole trial up. The case that changed everything. Jamel Maurice Demons, streets know him as YNW Melly, came up in Gifford, Florida, one of the most slept-on, starved-out pockets of the Treasure Coast. And this ain't no story about some random rapper who stumbled into the wrong zip code. This is about a young who clawed his way out of poverty and cycles of street violence on the backs of his brothers, ran up the charts, and then watched his whole world get snatched in a single night. October 26, 2018, late-night studio session in Miramar. 2 bodies, a staged scene, and a murder charge that's been sitting on Melly's neck for over 2,500 days with no verdict to show for it. Prosecutors say Melly put shots into his day ones, Anthony YNW Sack Chaser Williams and Christopher YNW Juvie Thomas Jr. inside a Jeep, then dressed it up as a drive-by with co-defendant Cortland YNW Bortland Henry. These weren't ops. These were he knew since elementary, dudes he recorded with, dudes who carried the YNW flag same as him. Forensics said the shots came from inside the vehicle, not from a passing car, not from outside, from inside that Jeep. Melly was allegedly pinging the Jeep's location from his own phone that night. Bloodstains mapped the interior. Shell casings told the story the defense been fighting ever since. And the murder weapon, the gun that should be sitting at the center of every ballistics argument, has never been recovered. Bortland pulled up to the hospital solo with 2 bodies and told the police it was a random hit. That story fell apart almost before it left his mouth. The motive? That's where the whole thing gets grimy and unclear. Whispers of jealousy. Sack Chaser's star was climbing fast, and some people said Melly felt the pressure. Others pointed to gang tensions boiling under the YNW surface. Nobody was talking about publicly. Money, ego, the kind of quiet fractures that split tight crews apart before anyone even sees the crack forming. No clean motive has ever been put on record, and the defense leaned hard into that gap. If Melly loved these men like blood, if they were the foundation of everything he was building, where's the logic in taking them out? Defense positioned Melly as a product of his environment, a young man shaped by the same streets that ate so many others before him, with no rational reason to dismantle the team that was carrying him to the top. The streets don't deal in clean answers, and that's exactly the kind of smoke that kept this case breathing through a mistrial, years of delays, and now a retrial locked in for January 2027. But before we get into all that, lock in on what this case is really about at its core. It's about loyalty and what happens when that loyalty gets questioned by 12 strangers in a box. It's about betrayal, real or alleged. It's about whether the legal system can serve up anything close to justice when the evidence keeps getting wrapped up in prosecutorial misconduct, unauthorized leaks, and the kind of courthouse politics that make a fair trial look like a pipe dream. February 2019, 19 years old. Melly walked himself in and got slapped with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Death penalty on the table, not as a scare tactic, as the prosecution's actual stated goal. First trial finally ran in 2023 and ended in a mistrial after the jury hung 9-3 in favor of conviction. Not an acquittal, not a conviction, a stalemate. 9 jurors looked at the evidence and said guilty. 3 looked at the same evidence and said not enough. And one of those 3 later went on record saying Melly got framed. That kind of split tells you this case was never clean a day in its life. Here's where the courtroom turned into a full-scale war zone. Evidence disputes started stacking like unread motions on a public defender's desk. Defense formally accused prosecutors of burying a detective's lies. We're getting deep into that in part 2. The state tried to walk Melly's own lyrics in as confessions, arguing his music was a signed admission of guilt. Defense called it a First Amendment hit on rap as an art form. And in October 2025, an appeals court blocked broad digital evidence from Melly's phone, texts, emails, all of it, limiting what could come in at retrial to the day of the murders only. That was a win, real one. But it didn't plug the leaks, because the leaks started dropping and they hit different. Viral clips in December 2025 allegedly showed crime scene footage, bodies in the Jeep, ballistics shutting down the drive-by narrative cold. Associates' interrogation videos hit the internet with fingers pointed straight at Melly. Then came the autopsy leaks. Juvie and Sack Chaser's full reports put into public circulation by a lawyer in what the defense called a catastrophic prosecutorial blunder. Close-range entry wounds, angles consistent with an inside job, details that had no business living on Twitter before a jury ever laid eyes on them, but there they were, out in the world permanently. And that leak, that's the moment the defense drew the line right there in open court.
There's no justification for it, Judge, and there's no justification for John Phillips then taking that evidence.
Defense counsel said it straight to the judge's face. No justification for releasing a victim's photo into the public. No justification for the opposing attorney then turning around and posting that material on his Twitter timeline like it's content. That moment was bigger than one leaked image. It captured the entire rotten atmosphere of a case where the rules keep getting bent until they snap, where sensitive evidence ends up on social media before it ever reaches a courtroom, and where the right to a fair trial has never felt more like a theoretical concept than a lived reality. When defense said those words, they weren't just objecting to one post. They were building a paper trail, a documented pattern they were going to drag all the way to the retrial.
And publishing it on his Twitter account.
The defense didn't let it die in the moment. They made it part of a broader, documented argument that the prosecution's side had been playing loose with evidence integrity since day one. Every leak, every social media post, every unauthorized drop, all of it went into the record, brick by brick. That set the stage for everything that followed, because once the chain of custody started looking shaky, once the leaks kept coming, Melly's attorneys had real ammunition to work with, and they spent every round. Here's the other thing you need to understand going in. Melly has been posted up in Broward County Jail under conditions his defense described as debilitating isolation, restricted family contact, no natural sunlight, surveillance around the clock every day. His legal team took it to court, filing a lawsuit directly against the sheriff's office for unconstitutional treatment, arguing the conditions amounted to cruel and unusual punishment for a man who hasn't been convicted of a single thing. February 2026, a court-ordered haircut became a whole viral moment, a symbol of a man who can't control even the most basic thing about his own appearance while the state makes every decision about his life. Nearly 8 years in custody, no final verdict. That's the backdrop every courtroom development has to be measured against. And into that pressure cooker, the cell phone evidence dropped like a live grenade. Defense attorneys filed motions alleging the state tampered with the victims' phones, and then, even after getting caught up in those allegations, still didn't produce full downloads of those devices. Prosecutors handed over reports, investigator summaries, not the raw data, not the unfiltered digital forensics, the edited highlight reel.
The state attorney has yet to provide cell phone downloads of the victims despite motions filed by the defense alleging that they tampered with the evidence.
Defense put that allegation on record in open court in front of the judge. This wasn't a social media theory getting smuggled through the courthouse door. This was a formal legal argument with filed motions behind it, grounded in basic discovery law. Give us the downloads or explain in court why you can't.
They've had an opportunity to hear it, and yet they turned over again reports of the two decedents' cell phones rather than in full downloads.
Reports instead of full downloads. That's not a technicality, that's the whole game. Full downloads could be carrying exculpatory messages, different names in the contact list, location data that contradicts the prosecution's timeline, call logs that tell a completely different story than what the state is selling. Reports are filtered. They reflect whatever the investigators decided to include. Defense was saying it plainly. We asked for everything, and you slid us the abridged version. Part 1 is the foundation, the charges, the evidence, the leaks, the isolation. Over 2,500 days of Melly's life swallowed by this case. The system that was supposed to handle justice kept producing scandal instead. But that scandal, the leaks, the misconduct, the missing data, that's exactly what cracked this thing wide open and handed the defense the narrative they needed heading into 2027. The tampering plots. October 2023. Melly's already in a cell waiting on a retrial date when prosecutors come back through the door with a whole new set of charges. Witness tampering. The allegation that Melly, operating from behind bars with zero freedom of movement, had put together a jailhouse operation specifically built to shut up Mariah Hamilton, his ex, a key witness the prosecution was banking on to help put him away forever. The details came in specific and ugly. Prosecutors claimed Melly was sliding handwritten notes to inmates, including a man named Terrence Mathis, directing a whole web of phone calls engineered to pressure Hamilton and her mother into staying off the stand. Messages that reportedly carried gang affiliations as the unspoken threat underneath the words. Solicitation to cause harm. The message was clear even when nobody said it directly. Don't testify, or consequences follow. Hamilton, once Melly's partner, a woman who knew him at a level most people never get to, got officially classified by the court as a hostile witness. She got briefly caged for contempt in 2020 2025 before they cut her loose. Her refusal to cooperate put on full display just how fractured and fear-drenched the loyalties in this case had become. The people who used to ride for Melly were either taking deals, going ghost, or ending up in handcuffs themselves. 4 counts stacked on top of the murder charges: tampering with a witness, directing criminal gang activity, solicitation, and conspiracy. Any one of those charges alone could have added serious years. All 4 together painted a portrait of a defendant who wasn't just accused of committing 2 murders, he was accused of trying to sabotage the entire judicial process set up to judge him for those murders. That's a different beast. That's a defendant who looks guilty to everyone, even the juror who walked in wanting to give him the benefit of the doubt. 652 days. That's how long Melly carried all 4 of those charges stacked on top of everything else already crushing him. Then, January 20th, 2026, jury selection for the retrial is sitting right there on the calendar. Prosecutors dropped all 4 counts, cited Hamilton's refusal to cooperate as the official reason. Without her on the stand anchoring the tampering case, they had no viable path to push it forward. Defense went public immediately, declaring no crimes had occurred and that Melly had been dragged through 652 extra days of hell for nothing. The real question nobody could answer clean: was this weak evidence finally hitting the wall, or was it a calculated retreat, a decision to drop the side battle and stack all the firepower on the murder case for 2027? Either way, the ground shifted. 652 days of extra psychological and legal tonnage wiped. Melly's attorneys pivoted straight to bond arguments, making the case that with the tampering charges gone and the retrial still over a year out, there was no legitimate reason to keep him locked up. Judges denied the bond. Flight risk, death penalty still on the table. But the narrative momentum had swung toward Melly's side for the first time in years, and the whole culture felt it. And that still wasn't the most explosive misconduct allegation buried inside this case. The lead detective, the one individual who built and carried the evidentiary foundation of everything the prosecution put together against Melly. According to testimony that came out through these proceedings, a prosecutor from the same office, described as esteemed, someone with credibility on both sides, came forward and reported that she personally witnessed that detective attempt to suborn perjury, not stretch the truth, not shade a timeline, not cut a corner nobody would notice. Deliberately, actively attempted to get another law enforcement officer to commit perjury, to stand under oath, and lie, in the exact case being built to potentially execute Jamel Demons.
The head detective on a first-degree murder case that's about to start.
Recording in progress.
I apologize. That's all right. Was reported by a esteemed prosecutor that she witnessed him try to suborn.
Let that land. The lead detective, the person whose name is on the reports, the one whose investigative work holds the prosecution's entire case together, reported by a prosecutor from his own side for trying to cook testimony in a death penalty case.
And have another officer lie about it. In the very case that it's on.
In the very case, not some old beef from a different jurisdiction, not a misconduct finding from years back on an unrelated investigation, the same murder case that is actively being used to try to put Melly on death row. That allegation, properly introduced at retrial, has the potential to blow the prosecution's entire structure apart. If the man who built the case tried to manufacture the testimony holding it up, what else did his hands touch that can't be trusted? Which reports stand? Which conclusions hold weight? Which parts of this whole investigation were clean? That's exactly the context that made the Snapchat evidence hearing explode the way it did. When prosecutors rolled into court one morning, carrying a fresh batch of chat message downloads, allegedly pulled from an account they attributed to Melly, the defense wasn't about to wave it through. Not after everything that had already surfaced about how this investigation was run.
The issue is we got presented this morning with a host of chat downloads that were purportedly downloaded from the chat account, whom the state purports to be Mr. Demons.
That morning, day of, zero heads up, no advance notice, no time to investigate, no window to authenticate or build a response. And the defense came strapped with questions the state hadn't answered. Who confirmed this was actually Melly's account? What was the chain of custody from download to courtroom? When was access obtained and under what authority?
Before she introduces any statements, I think she needs to establish the relevance. This is just a download of a series of conversations
relevance, authentication, prejudice, hearsay. Defense laid out every legal threshold the state needed to clear before one message from that download could get anywhere near a jury. This wasn't stalling or obstruction. This was defense lawyering doing exactly what the Constitution built it to do. You don't drag unverified chat logs into a death penalty case and call them evidence without a fight. Bigger picture. Every time defense raised these objections, they were doing it against the backdrop of an investigation already contaminated by a perjury coaching detective, leaked autopsy photos on Twitter, and tampering charges that evaporated after 652 days. The credibility of everything the prosecution touched was sitting under a microscope. Surprise Snapchat drops in the morning didn't just raise legal questions, they reinforced a pattern, and defense was making sure the judge was counting every entry in that pattern. Meanwhile, Bortland, the co-defendant, the man who drove those bodies to the hospital and fed police the random attack story, quietly took a plea deal in 2025 for accessory charges, 10 years, left Melly standing completely alone in the fight, without even the complicated comfort of a co-defendant in the foxhole with him. The betrayal narrative that had haunted this case from the jump. Did Melly cross his brothers? Now had its own mirror. Did Bortland cross Melly by securing his own exit and leaving him to face the death penalty solo? The public swallowed all of this through a social media lens that kept bending the signal into whatever shape got the most clicks. Viral X posts, YouTube thumbnails screaming YNW Melly freed, millions of views built on pure fiction. As of March 8, 2026, Melly is still in Broward County Jail, retrial a year out, but the dropped charges, the perjury coaching detective, the unannounced Snapchat dumps, the missing phone data, none of that was fabricated online. All of it happened in real courtrooms on the record, in front of judges, and together it built the platform for what's about to come. The new evidence. Here's what the mainstream keeps sleeping on. The state's own witness strategy was already crumbling before one juror got seated for the retrial. This wasn't a situation where the prosecution had everything locked up tight and the defense was scrambling to find a crack. The prosecution's whole house had fractures running through the foundation, and those fractures got wider every month that 2025 and 2026 rolled through. Mariah Hamilton, the hostile witness, the ex, the woman the state built part of their case on, turned out to be so uncooperative that prosecutors walked away from 4 charges rather than put her on a stand. She clearly had no intention of standing on voluntarily. That ain't a minor setback. That's a load-bearing pillar of your case, refusing to hold any weight. But Hamilton wasn't done creating headlines after that. Reports broke in March 2026 that Melly's own mother had worn a wire, allegedly to pull together information that could help her son's defense heading into trial. The intention was freedom. The result may have been the opposite. All hip-hop reported that whatever that wire captured could actively hurt Melly's case instead of helping it. A mother going to war for her child, potentially dropping ammunition straight into the prosecution's hands in the process. That's not just irony. That's the same tragic, tangled, suffocating loyalty that has defined every corner of this case since day one. Every move made on Melly's behalf seems to open a new door to complications. Every attempt to clear the smoke drops more of it in the room, and everybody close to him keeps finding themselves caught in the gears of a legal machine that doesn't stop grinding. Now let's talk about the witness cross-examination reversal, because this one exposed exactly how fragile the state's edges really were. A witness identified in the hearings as Miss P, someone whose testimony the prosecution had been carefully positioning and managing like an asset, became a significant flashpoint when the state's stance shifted mid-proceedings without a clean explanation. Defense put the inconsistency directly on record. The language was precise and pointed.
Mr. Klinger represented to the court that if Ms. Boutros testified, that the state would not cross-examine her and that she would be left to say whatever she was going to testify.
The state made an explicit, documented representation to the court. Let Ms. P testify, and we won't touch her on cross. Leave her alone to say what she's going to say. That's an unusual concession in any murder trial. It signals either that the prosecution was completely comfortable with whatever she'd say, or that they were genuinely worried about what she might say if pressed, and chose to avoid opening that door entirely.
When she testified during the motions to suppress, Mr. Klinger did in fact question her. It was 2 or 3 innocuous questions, pretty much, but did not go into credibility or anything like that.
They said they wouldn't cross her. Then they did. Light, careful, non-confrontational, but they crossed her. 2 or 3 questions, maybe not going hard at credibility, but still a direct contradiction of what they told the court they'd do. That inconsistency became live ammo for the defense, who framed it as one more line in a growing log of the prosecution, saying one thing to the judge and doing another in the room. Autopsy photo leaks, a perjury coaching detective, a promise broken on cross. The pattern was writing itself. Through all of this, months. The judge was threading a needle, trying to hold these proceedings together while legal grenades kept rolling across the floor. When defense raised concerns about whether phone call statements tied to the earlier tampering allegations could come in at trial, the court's response showed exactly how complicated this retrial was going to get.
Okay, so for this one, I'll defer on it. Again, each side can make whatever appropriate objection they need to at the time of trial.
The judge wasn't picking a side. The judge was saying these questions couldn't be answered in the abstract. They needed the full weight of trial testimony behind them before any responsible ruling could come down. That sounds measured, but what it actually means is none of this is over. Every disputed evidentiary question gets loaded into the chamber and dragged into that 2027 courtroom.
Again, I'll repeat, if it's an issue that I need to send the jury out to have a more thorough discussion with the lawyers, I'm happy to do that.
A judge already anticipating mid-trial jury out hearings before the trial even starts. That's a signal. A judge who's looked at this case and knows January 2027 is not going to run smooth. The legal wars from the pre-trial hearings don't stop at the courtroom door. They continue in real time, in front of a jury, in a case where the outcome is life or death. Pull back and take stock. What does the evidence landscape actually look like heading into 2027? The October 2025 appeals court ruling blocking broad digital evidence from Melly's phone was a structural win the defense needed. Years of texts, emails, digital communication history capped at murder day only. That cuts both ways. It shields Melly from a character assassination built on years of phone data being weaponized against him piece by piece, but it also forces the prosecution to build their whole narrative from a narrower, more constrained evidentiary window. Less room to maneuver, less ability to construct context around what they say happened. The December 2025 viral clips, alleged crime scene footage, alleged interrogation confessions from associates remain unverified as legally operative material. Court TV and major outlets documented the evidence disputes in depth, but no leaked clip has triggered a release order or caused a single charge to disappear. The gap between what goes viral on the internet and what actually carries weight inside a courtroom is enormous in this case, and that gap has been exploited hard in both directions, by people claiming Melly is already free, and by people claiming leaked footage locks his fate. What's legally undisputed and still standing? The forensics. Shots from inside the vehicle hasn't been suppressed and hasn't gone anywhere. DNA recovered from a water bottle inside the Jeep. Cell tower data, placing Melly in the area at the relevant time. These are the prosecution's structural pillars, and while everything around them has been getting battered by misconduct allegations and evidence integrity disputes, those core forensic foundations are still upright heading into 2027. But here's the variable that changed the whole equation between 2023 and 2027. The 9-3 hung jury from the first trial. 3 people, 3 regular human beings who sat through every piece of forensic evidence, heard about a detective credibly accused of trying to manufacture testimony, watched a prosecution that leaked autopsy photos and dropped surprise Snapchat downloads without notice, and said, not enough for us to be certain. That's not nothing. That's reasonable doubt operating in a real jury room in the real case. 3 votes for acquittal in a death penalty murder trial is the foundation the defense is going to build every move in 2027 on top of. Heading into January 2027, the defense is standing in a stronger position than they occupied walking into 2023. The dropped tampering charges wiped out the single most damaging narrative about Melly as a defendant, that he actively tried to rig his own process. Gone. The detective allegation, properly surfaced and supported, could shatter the credibility of every piece of evidence that man's hands ever touched. Melly's mother's wire introduces a live wild card that neither side fully controls between now and trial. And 50 Cent's reaction when the tampering charges dropped, this changes everything, captured the real pulse of the culture. Hip-hop is locked in on this case. A whole generation is locked in. Victims' families are locked in, demanding the closure that over 7 years of delays keep denying them. The weight of this isn't just legal anymore. It's cultural, it's generational, and it's deeply personal for everyone inside its orbit. Melly's lawsuit against the Broward County Sheriff's Office, alleging cruel conditions, no sunlight, around-the-clock surveillance, total social isolation, is still unresolved. His physical and mental deterioration after nearly 8 years in pretrial custody is documented and on the record. Death, penalty still on the table. Retrial locked in for January 2027. Whatever the verdict ends up being, acquittal, conviction, or a second mistrial, the story of YNW Melly is already one of the most consequential, most tangled, and most revealing criminal cases in the entire history of hip-hop. Not just for what it says about one man, but for what it exposes about how the machinery of justice operates when it meets fame, street loyalty, prosecutorial overreach, and a media ecosystem that can't stop leaking the evidence before the jury ever sees it. If you enjoyed this video, click on any of the cards on your screen.